I sit on a National Academy of Sciences panel with the lovely title of essentially Terrorism and the Grid. And we've been waiting with a finished paper on this to get it out to the public. The gist of it might say, if it were ever released, that in fact there's a lot of work going on security. There are significant efforts underway by utilities in advance or in addition to getting additional authorities on this. There is, because of the way that our grid is designed, it would be very, very, very unlikely to be able to take out the grid.
It's too inefficient.
It's too inefficient and it's too disparate. There are bigger threats to the grid and to the modernization of it, and it's the aging infrastructure. It's what you all talked about before, which is that these little pieces all out there. In fact, having the plug-in hybrid system designed right would actually decentralize the grid and make it more robust. So I just, Jim, with all due respect, I wouldn't want to leave it out there that nobody's doing anything on this topic. I think that's not true.
John, real quick, I want to get more questions.
I think I wanted to make the distribution point, but I think the other thing, as Jim raises and scares us with the thought of moving to a system of transportation based more on electricity, the very real security threats from doing nothing are intense. Mass migration, weak and failing states, scarce water resources, the capacity of the United States to kind of cope with doing nothing will soon swamp even the kind of nightmare scenarios that Jim's talking about. So I think we've got to get on with it. We've got to move down this track.
Good.
The point is they're not one or the other.
Right.
They're not one or the other. You have to incorporate the security as you move to the clean energy electrons.
Please, would you identify yourself?
I think I broke it. My name is Pamela Stevens with Envision Solar. I'm a Californian, and my question pertains, first of all, thank you for mentioning the renewables tax credit. We need that. Envision Solar, we need that. My question
Hold the microphone a little closer. Yeah.
My question pertains to distributed generation, and it's a good segue from the previous question about national security. One of the concepts that was written about this past week is something that our company does, is we recover space in parking lots with a solar infrastructure that protects against, it can abate stormwater, produce clean electricity, provide shade for customers, and also create a very intense utility scale distributed generation and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And I just wanted to get some thoughts on distributed generation and that role that plays in electric vehicles and national security.
Who would like to take that?
It's very much the same as the last question. I mean, as Jim's, in other words, you know, he's telling you the problem, you're telling the solution. Which is redundancy, resiliency, agility, and power that we're not going to be able to deal with sequentially. We just have so much and just-in-time delivery. That's where we've been, and then throw on top of that an aging infrastructure. We're in a world of hurt. So we need to modernize the superhighways, the connectivity of the nation that Jay has talked to, but at the same time, in parallel, we've got to accept and encourage and incentivize redundancy and resiliency from distributed gen. In addition, empowering your customers to feed in and make a difference.
The additional advantage, if you think of the internet, is that also drives innovation. You've pushed innovation out to the edge of the cloud rather than in sort of the main power producers of the country. And I think that creates its own virtuous cycle, which is also, I think, an important aspect of what you're talking about.
Tom, may I just...
I want to get you more questions if we could. So let's, so we get as many people as we can. We only got 5 more minutes, so real quick.
Hi, my name's Carter Brown. I'm with Boulder Electric Vehicle. We build 6,000-pound electric delivery trucks. There's one point that I feel everybody in this room is missing with the vehicle-to-grid idea, which is that every time you charge and discharge a set of batteries, no matter how good they are, even if they're A123s, you shorten their cycle life. So if you're going to take a consumer product that the consumer pays a lot of money for, and you're going to shorten the lifespan of the car that they drive by 50% or even 60 or 70% by charging and discharging it on the grid every single day, there needs to be a significant either payback for the consumer or tax break or pay-in from the utility company or something to benefit the consumer by killing their batteries in 3 years instead of 10 years. I'm wondering if any of you up there have considered that, or if any of you have solutions for that.
Okay. John and then Jay.
Actually, this is a myth, and let me dispel the myth. And here's the chart, if we can see the chart. This chart basically shows this car out here providing regulation services to the PGM grid. It's providing them, following them with this red line underneath the blue line, which is the signal from PGM. The green line is charging. You can provide grid services without ever interrupting charging at all, especially regulation services. You do not have to charge and discharge necessarily to provide those. You can, in fact, do this without affecting the charge whatsoever.
I think, John, his point
Where
is
can I
making
get
up
a
for the
copy of
capital
that chart?
cost. Sorry, what did you say? I think his point was making up for the capital cost difference in the battery up front if we want to integrate them in the vehicles today. Wasn't that your main point?
Yeah, the capitalization of it and the
Right.
consumer
So-
payback
well,
from the
His
utility
point,
company.
though, Andy, was ultimately by doing vehicle to grid, you're going to decrease the life of the battery. I'm saying
Is that
you
your
don't.
point?
You don't at all. You don't at all.
Can
Not-
I throw
Jay,
out
go ahead.
one idea? I think eventually we need to go to a financing system to finance acquisition and maintenance of the battery separate from the car, possibly. And when you do that, you give a lot more flexibility. We look at Shiagassi's model, which because they can shift batteries around to higher and lower mileage needs a day, they can maximize the efficiency of the battery. So if we go to a GMAC that can finance your battery and manage your battery, it'll be much more efficient. I think that's one step.
I want to because there are 4 people left in line. If you'd each just quickly ask your question, and then we'll let everybody just bite off whichever one they want, and that'll close it.
Bob Stevens, General Motors. The transition from petroleum-powered to grid-powered vehicles represents a significant improvement in greenhouse gas emissions. However, the grid is still 50% coal. The long-term solutions are to go to solar thermal, geothermal, or wind. And just in case the audience doesn't realize it, those are technologically and economically feasible. I point to the MIT Hot Rock study about geothermal potential, which is enormous in this country, and the DOE's recent report on wind. In the meantime, until we get there, have you all considered how we're going to do the trade-off between the movement of CO2 emissions from the automotive side to the utility side, and who's going to get the credit and burden for that?
Quickly.
Stan Klein, the congressman talked in his comments about the Europeans being ahead of us in certain activities. I just wanted to point out that our electric grid has a lot of legacy information technology in there, and I'm not talking about the interface to the home. I'm talking about the devices in the substation and so forth. There's an advanced automation system where the technology was developed at EPRI, but it isn't being taken up as well in North America, as in the U.S., as it is being taken up in Europe, and that's somewhat of an artifact of how the Europeans buy their substations and so forth. I think one thing that's going to be needed is some relief. I know that I was at a meeting having to do with the security aspect, and there was one gentleman from one major utility. He's got 400 substations. It's going to cost $200,000 a substation at minimum to upgrade the security there, so that a lot of this, some of the state regulators are going to need to loosen up their, or something's going to have to happen to enable utilities to spend that kind of money to upgrade those facilities.
Good point, actually. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Caitlin Gold, American Council on Renewable Energy, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate on how you'd propose implementing nationwide RPSs.
A nationwide RPS?
Yes.
Yeah. Last one. Make it
Hello,
good.
Ted Abramson, Electrorides, California. There's one underlying market issue that I'm sure you might be aware of, but it has to do with the distribution of electric cars mainstream. You have dealerships that are making roughly 5% margin on the sale of the vehicle, 35% on parts, and roughly 65% on service. That will pretty much be cut way down if we introduce large-scale electric vehicles. So that's an issue just from the distribution point that has to be addressed economically at the local dealer level, state by state, city by city. So